What is up, guys? Coding Jesus here. Guys, in today's video, I want to review the top contentions that not only Pirate Software had, but a lot of his fanboys had with my video yesterday, in which I reviewed the code that he wrote for his game Heartbound. Now, while the video was a stunning success in terms of engagement, there was a couple of themes that kept repeating from detractors that I think are worth addressing in a separate video. So let's get into it. The first claim that I saw time and time again is that your code quality shouldn't matter if you're a solo game dev, and that code quality only somehow matters if you work in a team. Now, you'd think that if you're working on a passion project, you'd be interested in holding yourself to the highest possible standard, since you can make your own decisions, free of any corporate timeline, and not subject to demands of other employees. You know, they say this with such confidence, as if poor code is not going to hold you back in your own development process and you're somehow impervious to the effects of your poor decisions as long as you make those bad decisions yourself. Usually when you work with a team, you can get away with poorer code because you won't need to deal with the consequences of that code as you pawn it off to somebody else and work on something totally separate. But as a solo developer, you need to deal with and contend directly with all the trade-offs that you make as you make those decisions while you code your game or your project or your whatever. In other words, every decision you make will either make life easier for you or harder for you down the line. As technical debt accumulates, you bear the entire burden of that debt, which slows down development. Now, for those of you who aren't technical debt is a term that refers to the extra work you're going to need to put in down the line because you currently made a decision that was not ideal. So you are delivering something faster today only to slow down future delivery tomorrow, the day after, the week after, the month after, etc. It's kind of like a ball and chain that's tied around your leg, and every step you take forward, that ball grows and grows and grows, which decreases the velocity of your development. Now, the fact that Heartbound has taken over 8 years to development and is still in early access, despite the fact that the game took inspiration from Undertale, which took less time to make and provided more content, is a reflection of the fact that code quality is important and it will stifle your development if you do not take it seriously. And it's kind of ironic because the same people that are trying to make excuses for poor code are the same people that actually play the game and are expecting features to be delivered. I don't care if his code's poor in the sense that it doesn't impact me directly. Yeah, I might care from a technical perspective to try to reconcile his game development experience or his game industry experience with who he claims to be and what he produces, but I'm not going to play his game. I don't care for his game. And the same people that do care for his game are the same people that say that it's okay for the game code to be slop, when in fact they're waiting on those same features that require the game code to be clean in order to develop and do so quickly. Now, I think that my views here can really be summarized in a dialogue that I had with Quinthio when I jumped on his stream yesterday and talked a bit more about the video. The practices that he's employed so far are practices that I'd expect from somebody that watched Khan Academy for a week, not somebody that's been working on a project for 8 years, claims to, worked at Blizzard and been around game devs, or at some certain points claimed that he's a game dev. If he just came and said, this is what I produced, I learned game dev for 1 or 2 weeks, Khan Academy, I spent an hour or two every day, I'd say that's actually good progress. But to come and claim that you're some authority in the space, this is the code you've produced, to me, there is a massive disconnect between what you say you're capable of based off your background and what you've produced. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think that really comes down to the heart of this critique or that claim, and that is that Pirate Software is constantly portraying himself as this sort of expert authority on everything that's wrong about nothing, and uses all this hyperbolic language and associations when in reality, what he's tangibly produced is below what you'd expect from a junior developer or even an intern.
People call me the Bob Ross of programming, which I think is a pretty big honor because I like Bob Ross's stuff.
Here, for example, he didn't say directly, I'm Bob Ross. He said, everybody thinks I'm Bob Ross of programming. What does that mean? It's trying to paint the picture that there's a broad consensus that you are the best developer out there and you are the go-to guy for anything related to game programming, which is his niche.
You're a hacker. Like that's where you like kind of started.
An actual hacker.
An actual hacker. Like,
Yes,
not like I'm a hacker type. No, you're an actual hacker. You've won.
Like an actual hacker.
Yeah,
My last job was hacking power plants for the federal government. I worked for the United States Department of Energy.
So a dude walks in with a laptop and a suit, and you lean over to, who's that guy?
Well, that's the hacker from the government.
Yeah, that's the hacker.
It's even worse because we go in like 3 to 4 man teams, man. So like we've got a team.
Oh, you had a fleet. You had like a team of dudes in suits holding laptops, walking into restricted areas. Okay.
When he says things like this, what he's trying to paint in your mind as a viewer is that he's some sort of Unit 8200 Mossad agent writing zero-day exploits on USBs that are snuck into Iranian nuclear facilities and that infest and shut down the entire technical operation of that nuclear power plant. When in reality, if you look at his LinkedIn and reconcile it against his skill set, what he did was social engineering. He wrote phishing emails and tried to gain access to credentials and user systems that way. And so all this really culminates in the disconnect between who Thor plays himself up to be and then what he can produce. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that his GitHub is also totally empty. It's empty because he has nothing to show for his 20 years of experience as a veteran in the space. Now, Pirate himself also responded, and he got a bit hung up on the fact that my mouse had some variable highlighted, despite the fact that I never talked about that variable. It's actually quite funny, because I refer to every variable other than the one that he referred to in his reply. But skipping over that, he makes the claim that you can't define a Boolean in GameMaker because GameMaker itself doesn't have a native Boolean type in its scripting language. In other words, it interprets reals as Booleans. Now, to reconcile the fact that he used a Boolean in his code with what he said, I decided to do what any developer would do, and that is I consulted the documentation. So if you go to data types in GameMaker, oh, look at that. You are also provided with constants, true and false, which can always be used in your code to prevent any issues, should the native Boolean type be defined later. So GML defines constants true as 1 and false as 0, and the documentation itself even recommends that you use true and false instead of reals in case that association between a Boolean and a real ever gets changed to a Boolean and some other native definition of a Boolean. So in other words, if they ever replace the aliasing of bools for reals with bools for actual bools, they recommend that you use true and false. But we know he's not going to concede on this point or admit the fact that he was wrong, given his track record. So let's move on to the next claim. Another comment that I've seen is that you've never worked with GameMaker, so you must not know what you're talking about. Another equally absurd variant of this is what he's writing is not C++, or anybody who has worked with technology or more than one programming language understands that languages are just toolkits. Each toolkit is uniquely positioned to solve a given problem. Now, while there might be unique features in every toolkit, essentially there's a lot of overlap. Okay? An integer in one language is going to be very similar to an integer in another. Every language is going to have for loops, etc., etc. So while the actual toolkit might be different, the same principles, patterns, and design decisions should apply in large part to any problem that you're trying to solve. The only difference is the tools that you use to solve that problem are going to be a little different. What does that look like in practice? Take that code snippet alarm 0 equals 0, alarm 1 equals 0, alarm 2 equals 0. You don't need to copy and paste that code every single time. I'd expect an intern or somebody learning code in Khan Academy to copy and paste. You can simply replace that all with a for loop. So what does it say about somebody that they haven't even considered to use a for loop for something as simple as this? If there's something that I regret, it's not being able to provide more substantive feedback. If you look at plenty of my other videos where I do a code review, I go into line by line the GitHub repository and break it down for my viewers, both saying what went well and what didn't go well and how can it be improved. But Thor didn't give me or really anybody the chance to do that with his code because all he does is share snippets and screenshots. You also shouldn't be representing an entire entity made up of health, position, maybe whether they're dead or alive, their ID, their inventory, as a number or an index into some array. That's not how you present character models or entities in game design. And I don't even need to be a game developer to understand that. I just watch 1 or 2 videos of the Cherno, and I already know that's the case. So hopefully you guys found this video informative or interesting. I'm going to now move on to other news. So unless anything new comes out that I think I can bring my unique perspective to, I'm going to put Pirate Software behind me and just keep moving forward. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Cheers.